Go to line number 4 to Goose Bay. Good morning, Jim. You're on the air.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fine this morning. How about you, Mr. Learning?
Good, thanks. I just wanted to pick up where we left off last evening with that Labrador discontent.
Go right ahead, sir.
Yeah, not so much on the discontent, actually, because that's up to Labradorians to settle that issue. Don't know what to say totally about that. The unfairness of it, I suppose, is what we would talking with the island, the population differential, the representation differential. And the fact is that with our population, we're just not going to gain in this forum. It's not working for us. So I guess the time has come to change it. The question is, how do we change it?
Right, and that is the big question here. Is it automatically life better for people in Labrador if you formed your own distinct government in the form of a territory like the other territories in the country?
Well, I think that in terms of, say, having more control over our environment, over our resources, and over our own lives, yes, there'd be a huge difference. I mean, it would take time for people to learn all of that, and we're going to make mistakes, but they'd be our mistakes. They wouldn't be a blame thing from offshore, sort of the way it is now. It's a time of misery, and there's no need to be miserating. Just get on with it and do it.
What misery are you referring to, sir?
Well, I suppose a good example would be this Muskrat Falls thing here. Like, going back to the town hall survey that Todd Russell did when he was MP, 82% of us said no to this, and there were quite a few submissions to the JRP said no, and then Ms. Dunderdale just dismissed us out of hand. And then there's another case where the Iron Strand, where the Nunatsiavut government didn't want this thing touched or explored. But nope, they were told that it was going to be explored, it was going to be touched, and there was nothing they could do about it. Things like that you have no control over, is external. If we made those decisions internally, we'd feel a lot better about them. But since we have no control over it, because don't forget, the Dunderdale government was playing to a majority government on the island, not to whoever was in Labrador with this Muskrat Falls trash.
So do you think developments like Muskrat Falls should be left up to decisions made by folks living in Labrador and not involving the rest of the province, considering the fact I'm also going to pay as much as anybody in Labrador on my bill for the repayment of the loan? Why shouldn't we all have a say?
Yeah, well, I don't think for me, it's not of course you will all pay. You will absolutely pay. Mm-hmm. It's not but for me, it's not a money issue. If we made that decision, then we would pay, but we would knowingly pay that we've done that to ourselves. When somebody else doing it to us, this is not good. And when we look at the southern rivers that are slated to be dammed, and they are from all the way down from this big river clear down to the Pinware River, these rivers are all to be dammed, with the exception of maybe the Hawk and the Sand Hill. Now, that takes out a lot of salmon rivers, and we have no control over that because, again, if the government is elected on the island and it says this is what we want, and that is what you're going to get. We have no say in it.
Yeah. I think we find ourselves in very similar positions here, even in the capital city in St. John's and elsewhere around the island and in Labrador. When you face government decisions, it generally doesn't come across as if they've consulted with you, and that doesn't matter what the issue is. I think that stands true. And the decisions are made at that point, whether or not they reflect my morals or my position on where money should be spent. I think we all face similar issues. Jim, the whole concept of what's been invested in Labrador, do you think the legitimacy of the argument is people have not invested fairly in Labrador, or it is more the perception of the fairness in the investment?
Well, when you're talking about investment, what you have to remember is mostly Labrador largely is a mineral base, iron specifically. There are other minerals, of course, but like Alberta with their oil, like Labrador with its iron, that's going one way. That's not going to grow back very fast. It'll grow back over millions of years, but not that fast. So we have no buffer zone, no heritage fund, so things like that we can take care of. It's not so much politics as it is practical reality of where is our future? What about the next 100 years? I've only got a few years left, but I like to think down the road for a couple of 100 years. Labrador needs to be built. Labrador needs to set up, if there is a way to set up coffers for the future, then we should do that, although money could be irrelevant tomorrow with the way that stuff works.
Fair enough.
But the point is the environment, the integrity of the environment has to be maintained, or this crash headlong, develop everything in sight. And when you have something like the island, which is a poor province, developing is very important because you basically have very little. What you have is mostly offshore, and we're a part of that offshore. So you're going to develop us. We just become a warehouse, which is another point of contention. Why should we just be a warehouse? Why can't we be like everybody else and decide what our fate is going to be?
But who else gets to make those decisions? Like, I mean, who are you referring to? Who gets to decide what their fate will be, whether it be Labrador or anywhere on the island?
What do
you said you should be able to get to decide what your fate will be, but who gets that luxury?
Well,
anywhere.
If in fact we had our own government, we would have that luxury, at least to make the decisions, good or bad, on shore. There's no need to be blaming the island for what we're going to lose, what we don't get. This is silly. What we need to do is fix this and make our own mistakes, or make good decisions.
Yeah, do you think that the conversation has as much traction as I hear from you and others in my social media and my email inbox and whatnot? Do you think the majority of people in Labrador feel like you do, sir, or they think that they have good opportunity in Labrador, good jobs, high-paying jobs, are not as frustrated as you are? What do you think the popular opinion is up there, or the consensus opinion?
Well, the consensus and the popular and then the reality are all three different things, right? Because you in-depth questions and demand in-depth answers. But just off the cuff, any of us who are Labradorians will say, yeah, we should be doing our own thing. That's what people will say. Now, in reality, what does that really mean? Well, that has to be examined. Mm-hmm. All of that has to be put under the microscope and given a good look and dealt with.
How do you do that? Is that a Labrador-specific committee with all walks of life represented? You hire some people to help you look at all the pros and cons and what's involved in establishing your own self-sufficient government? Is that how you do it, or is it left to the water cooler talk, the open line conversation? How do you go about that to make sure you actually have a legitimate, in-depth view?
I think the thing to do now is probably take it from the water cooler talk into a specific process, meaning that you set up a funding agency, to set up a think tank or a panel to go to the people with this in an intelligent form. Of course, it's a process, okay. So it has to be established.
Mr. Learning, I'm really appreciating and enjoying the phone calls with you. I hope you take the opportunity on a more frequent basis to talk about this, because I think it's gaining momentum, and whether or not we've ever had a real distinct hard look, and that's a cold eyes look at the legitimacy of separating the Labrador from the island. I think it's gaining steam. It's been on the go for a long time. The discontent has been around for decades, but I think it's growing now to heights that it's never seen before. I appreciate your call, sir. Anything else you want to wrap up with?
Yeah, I just want to say I don't think it's as much a separation issue as it is a self-determination.
As a self-governance.
We're already separate. If you go to the streets, you get a 10-mile gap of water. We're separate. So
fair enough.
It's just a matter of self-determining how we're going to govern ourselves.
And listen, it's a fair distinction. Nice talking with you, sir. All the best. Bye-bye.